I stood hidden behind the church door, listening to my own funeral service. My heart pounded in my chest as I heard my children laughing and joking while the pastor spoke about my tragic passing. These were the same children I had raised alone for, 20 years after their father abandoned us. The same children whose college education I'd paid for with the insurance money from my death. The same children who thought they had successfully drowned me at our family lake house 3 weeks ago. But here I was, very much alive, watching them celebrate my death while planning how to spend my $450,000 life insurance policy. They had no idea I was about to walk through those doors and show them that their perfect murder plan had failed. If you enjoy stories about justice and family betrayal, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more incredible true stories that will leave you shocked and amazed. My name is Amara Johnson. For most of my 46 years, I lived what I thought was a blessed life in Atlanta, Georgia. I worked as a nurse for over 20 years at Grady Memorial Hospital, dedicating myself to helping others heal while raising my 3 children, Michael, 26, Zora, 24, and Isaiah, 21. After their father walked out on us when Isaiah was just a baby. I had always been proud of how I managed to give my children everything they needed despite being a single mother. I worked double shifts, took extra weekend hours, and even picked up private nursing jobs to make sure they could attend good schools, participate in extracurricular activities, and eventually go to college. My own mother, who lived with us until she passed 5 years ago, helped raise the children while I worked. When she died, she left me her house, a beautiful 3-bedroom home in a nice part of town worth about $280,000, and her savings of $75,000. I also had my own retirement savings of $95,000 and a life insurance policy worth $450,000 that I had diligently paid into for 20 years, naming my 3 children as equal beneficiaries. I wanted to make sure they would be taken care of if anything happened to me, just as I had always taken care of them. The children all seemed to be doing well. Michael had graduated from Morehouse College with a business degree, but struggled to find stable work. He talked constantly about starting his own company but needed investment capital. Zora had studied psychology at Spelman College and worked at a small counseling center, though she complained about her salary and dreamed of opening her own practice. Isaiah was still at Georgia State University, studying computer science, with 1 year left to go. We had weekly Sunday dinners together at my house, where I would cook their favorite foods, jollof rice, fried plantains, and my special oxtail stew that they all loved. During these dinners, we would laugh, share stories, and I would listen to their dreams and struggles. I thought we were close. I believed they loved me as much as I loved them. Every year, we spent 2 weeks at our family lake house in North Georgia. It was a modest cabin that had been in my late husband's family for generations. Nothing fancy but filled with memories. The property was worth about $150,000, and I had made it clear in my will that it would be shared equally among my children. My closest friend was Ruth, a fellow nurse I had worked with for 15 years. We shared everything, our joys, sorrows, and worries about our children. "Amara," she would often tell me, "you give those children too much. When was the last time they did anything for you?" But I would always brush off her concerns. "They're just finding their way," I would say. "They'll come around." I also had a good relationship with my pastor, Reverend Thomas, at First Baptist Church, where I had been a member for over 25 years. He knew our family well and had watched my children grow up. "You've raised fine children, Sister Amara," he would say. "God smiles upon your dedication." I took comfort in his words, believing that my sacrifice and love would be rewarded with my children's success and appreciation. I never suspected that beneath their smiles and "I love you, Mom" was a darkness I couldn't imagine. I never thought that the children I had sacrificed everything for were capable of plotting my death for financial gain. I was blind to their true nature, choosing to see only what I wanted to see. Grateful, loving children who valued family above all else. How wrong I was. The first sign that something was wrong came 6 months ago, at Isaiah's 21st birthday dinner. I had spent all day cooking his favorite foods and had invited extended family and friends to celebrate. I'd even used some of my savings to buy him a used car. Nothing fancy, just a reliable Honda Civic that would help him get to his internship. I was so excited to surprise him with the keys. When I presented the gift, instead of the gratitude I expected, Isaiah looked disappointed. "A Civic? Mom, I told you I wanted a charger." "Isaiah, a charger is too expensive and not practical," I explained gently. "This is reliable and good on gas." Michael chimed in. "Mom always does this, buys the practical thing instead of what we actually want." Zora nodded in agreement. "Remember when I asked for those designer boots for graduation and got sensible work shoes instead?" I was stunned by their reaction. The car had cost $12,000, a significant amount from my savings. Yet here they were, making me feel like I had done something wrong. Later that evening, I overheard a conversation that sent a chill down my spine. I was cleaning up in the kitchen when I heard my children talking on the back porch, not realizing I could hear them through the open window. "How much longer do we have to pretend to be grateful for this stuff?" Isaiah was saying. "I'm tired of acting like I'm happy with her hand-me-downs and practical gifts." "Just be patient," Michael replied. "Mom's insurance policy is worth $450,000. Split 3 ways, that's $150,000 each. Plus the house and the lake property. We just need to wait." "Wait for what?" Zora asked. "For her to die of old age? She's only 46 and healthy as a horse. That could be decades." "There are ways to speed things up," Michael said, his voice dropping lower. There was a pause before Isaiah laughed nervously. "Man, you're crazy. I know you're joking, but don't say stuff like that." "Am I joking?" Michael replied. "Think about it. We could all use that money now, not when we're middle-aged." I dropped the plate I was washing, and it shattered on the floor. The conversation outside immediately stopped. My children rushed in, asking if I was okay. I smiled weakly and blamed my clumsiness, pretending I hadn't heard a word. But inside, my heart was breaking. Were my children really discussing my death as a financial opportunity? I didn't sleep that night. I told myself I had misunderstood, that Michael was just making a tasteless joke. They couldn't possibly want me dead. Not my children. Not the babies I had nursed. The toddlers whose tears I had wiped. The teenagers I had guided. Not the young adults who still came home every Sunday for dinner. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake the chill of Michael's words. There are ways to speed things up. The next day, I called Ruth and told her what I had overheard. "Amara, you need to take this seriously," she urged. "Change your life insurance beneficiaries. Change your will. Protect yourself." "I can't believe my own children would hurt me," I said. "There must be another explanation." "Then find it," Ruth said. "But in the meantime, be careful." I didn't change my will or insurance policy. I couldn't bring myself to believe the worst about my children. But I did start paying more attention to their behavior, looking for signs that what I'd heard was just a misunderstanding. What I found instead were more reasons to worry. 3 months after Isaiah's birthday, Michael suggested we take our annual trip to the lake house early. "Let's go in April instead of July," he said during Sunday dinner. "The weather's been so nice, and we could all use a break." Zora and Isaiah quickly agreed, seeming unusually enthusiastic about the change of plans. "It'll be perfect, Mom," Zora said. "Just the 4 of us like old times." I hesitated. April was an odd time for our lake trip, and Michael had never shown much interest in planning family activities before. But I wanted so badly to believe that they genuinely wanted to spend time with me that I agreed. "I'll need to request time off," I said, "but I think I can manage the last week of April." "Perfect," Michael said, exchanging glances with his siblings. "I'll take care of all the arrangements. You just show up and relax." In the weeks leading up to the trip, I noticed my children becoming more attentive. They called more often. They stopped by with small gifts. Isaiah even helped me clean the gutters without being asked, something he'd never done before. I wanted to believe their behavior was genuine, that my suspicions were unfounded, but something felt off. 2 weeks before the trip, I had lunch with Ruth. "I don't like this sudden lake house trip," she said. "It's too convenient after what you overheard." "But they've been so nice lately," I argued weakly. Maybe I misunderstood what they were saying. Ruth gave me a hard look. "Amara, listen to me. If you're going on this trip, You need to tell someone exactly where you'll be and check in every day, and you need to be on your guard. I promised her I would be careful, but I still couldn't fully accept that my own children might wish me harm. The day before we left for the lake house, I found Michael in my home office, looking through my financial papers. When I asked what he was doing, he claimed he was looking for a stapler. I noticed my life insurance policy documents had been moved. That night, I finally took Ruth's advice. I made copies of all my important papers, insurance policies, bank statements, property deeds, and gave them to her for safekeeping, along with a sealed letter detailing my suspicions. If anything happens to me, I told her, take these to the police. Ruth hugged me tightly. Nothing's going to happen to you because you're going to be vigilant. But I'll keep these safe, just in case. I also made a quick change to my life insurance policy, adding a secondary beneficiary, Ruth, who would receive the full amount if any of my primary beneficiaries were implicated in my death. I didn't tell my children about this change. When we arrived at the lake house the next day, everything seemed normal at first. We unpacked, prepared dinner together, and sat on the deck watching the sunset. But I couldn't shake the feeling of unease, especially when I noticed my children whispering to each other when they thought I wasn't looking. That evening, Michael made cocktails for everyone. A special recipe, he said, handing me a glass with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I pretended to sip but didn't swallow, noticing a slightly bitter aftertaste when I touched the liquid to my lips. Later, claiming exhaustion, I poured the drink down the sink and went to bed early, locking my bedroom door. Through the wall, I could hear my children talking in low, urgent voices. I couldn't make out the words, but their tone made my blood run cold. In the morning, Michael suggested we take the boat out. It's perfect weather for fishing, he said. Mom, you can drive the boat while we set up the gear. I agreed, but as we walked down to the dock, I sent a quick text to Ruth. On the boat with kids. If you don't hear from me by noon, call police. I slipped the phone into my pocket just as we reached the small motorboat. Once we were in the middle of the lake, Michael asked me to cut the engine. There's a good spot for bass right here, he said. As I leaned over to turn off the motor, I felt strong hands on my back shoving me hard. I heard Zora's gasp and Isaiah saying, "Do it," as I toppled into the cold water. The shock of hitting the water stole my breath. When I surfaced, gasping, I saw my 3 children staring down at me, their faces a mixture of determination and shock. Michael was holding a fishing weight, heavy enough to ensure I wouldn't resurface if it was tied to me. Why? I managed to choke out, treading water. We need the money, Mom, Michael said coldly. You don't understand what it's like trying to make it in this economy. We can't wait another 20 years for our inheritance. I've given you everything, I said, my voice breaking. Not enough, Zora replied. Never enough. Just let go, Mom, Isaiah added, his voice trembling slightly. It'll be quick, and then we can all have what we need. In that moment, I realized that my children, my flesh and blood, were actually trying to murder me for my money. The truth hit me with more force than the cold water. They didn't love me. They saw me as nothing more than a financial resource, an obstacle to their inheritance. As Michael reached for a rope, presumably to try to restrain me, I made a split-second decision. I took a deep breath and dove down, swimming away from the boat underwater. I'd been a strong swimmer since childhood, and fear gave me strength I didn't know I had. I swam until my lungs burned, surfacing only when I was hidden by a small cove some distance away. From my hiding spot, I watched as they searched the water's surface, calling my name with false concern. After 20 minutes, they started the boat's engine and headed back to the dock, presumably to report their mother's tragic accidental drowning. I stayed hidden in the cove, shivering until I was certain they were gone. Then I swam to the shore on the opposite side of the lake, where several vacation homes stood empty in the off-season. Breaking into one through a back window, I found dry clothes, a phone, and car keys. I called Ruth immediately. They tried to kill me, I whispered, still shaking from cold and shock. They actually tried to drown me in the lake. Oh my God, Amara, Ruth gasped. Where are you now? Are you safe? For the moment, I said. But my children think I'm dead, and I need to keep it that way until I figure out what to do. Come to my house, Ruth said. We'll go to the police together. No, I replied after a moment's thought. Not yet. I need proof first. They'll just claim it was an accident, and it will be my word against theirs. What are you going to do? Ruth asked, clearly worried. I'm going to let them think they succeeded, I said, a plan forming in my mind. I'm going to watch what they do next, and I'm going to gather evidence. And then when the time is right, I'm going to get justice. Amara, that's dangerous, Ruth protested. So is confronting them without proof, I countered. Trust me, Ruth. I know what I'm doing. And so began my life as a ghost, watching from the shadows as my own children mourned me publicly while celebrating privately. I was dead to the world, but very much alive and determined to expose the truth. The first thing I needed was a safe place to stay where my children wouldn't find me. Ruth offered her home, but I knew that would be the first place they might look if they ever suspected I was alive. Instead, I used the car I'd borrowed from the vacation home to drive to a small town about 2 hours away. I left cash to cover the clothes and use of the car, along with an anonymous note explaining there had been an emergency. In this new town, I checked into a motel under a false name, paying cash. I bought hair dye and scissors from a local drugstore and transformed my appearance, cutting my shoulder-length braids into a short style and dyeing my hair a lighter shade. I also purchased inexpensive glasses with clear lenses to further alter my look. Ruth was my only contact with my old life. She agreed to be my eyes and ears, to tell me what my children were doing while maintaining the pretense that she believed I was dead. I swore her to secrecy, emphasizing that my safety depended on no one knowing the truth. What about the police? Ruth asked during one of our calls. Your children tried to murder you, Amara. They need to be held accountable. And they will be, I assured her. But if I go to the authorities now, it will be my word against theirs. They'll claim I fell in accidentally, that they tried to save me. I need evidence. 3 days after my drowning, my children reported me missing. Search teams dragged the lake but found no body. After a week, the search was scaled back. After 2 weeks, with no sign of me and my car still parked at the lake house, authorities presumed I had drowned and that my body was trapped somewhere at the bottom of the lake. Through Ruth, I learned that my children were playing the part of grieving offspring perfectly. Michael, always the leader, spoke eloquently to the local news about his beloved mother, who had tragically drowned during their family vacation. Zora organized a lakeside vigil where she broke down in tears while sharing memories of me. Isaiah, the youngest and seemingly most affected, appeared genuinely distressed in the news footage Ruth sent me. But their private behavior told a different story. Ruth managed to befriend the barista at the coffee shop near Michael's apartment. Through this connection, she learned that my children met there regularly, always sitting in the back corner, speaking in hushed but excited tones. Once, the barista overheard them discussing the timeline for the insurance payout and what to do with Mom's house. I asked Ruth to hire a private investigator, Franklin Morris, a retired police detective who now worked independently. I had saved about $8,000 in cash that my children didn't know about, money I kept in a secret compartment in my closet for emergencies. Ruth retrieved this money before my children could find it and used it to pay Mr. Morris. Tell him everything, I instructed Ruth. Show him the letter I gave you before the trip. He needs to understand what's happening. Mr. Morris took the case immediately. If what you're saying is true, he told Ruth, these people committed attempted murder. I'll help you build a case that will stand up in court. He began by surveilling my children, documenting their activities and conversations whenever possible. He placed legal recording devices in public places where they met and photographed them from a distance. He also did background checks, looking into their financial situations. What he found confirmed my worst fears. Michael was $45,000 in debt from failed business ventures and gambling. Zora had maxed out 3 credit cards and taken out high-interest loans totaling $27,000. Isaiah, despite his youth, had accumulated $18,000 in debt beyond his student loans. They were desperate for money, and I was worth more to them dead than alive. Meanwhile, I remained dead, staying in motels and paying cash for everything. I purchased a prepaid phone that couldn't be traced to me, and used it only to contact Ruth and Mr. Morris. I wore my disguise whenever I went out and kept to myself, introducing myself as Marie to anyone who asked. 4 weeks after my drowning, with still no body recovered, the authorities officially declared me dead. A death certificate was issued, citing accidental drowning as the cause of death. My children wasted no time in filing claims for my life insurance and beginning the process of executing my will. Ruth attended the memorial service they organized at our church. She recorded it secretly on her phone, capturing not only their public performances of grief, but also their private moments when they thought no one was watching. "You wouldn't believe it, Amara," Ruth told me later. They had everyone convinced they were heartbroken. "Pastor Thomas gave a beautiful eulogy about what a loving mother you were. People were genuinely mourning you. But then, in the church bathroom, I overheard Zora and Michael laughing about how Mom finally did something useful by dying. They were discussing which rooms in your house they'd take when they moved in. The evidence was mounting, but it still wasn't enough. We needed clear proof of intent, something that explicitly showed they had planned to kill me. Mr. Morris suggested we try to get them to incriminate themselves on tape. People who think they've gotten away with something often brag about it, he explained. Especially when they're drinking. We need to catch them in an unguarded moment. 2 months after my death, the insurance company finally processed the claim. My 3 children received $150,000 each, just as they had planned. Mr. Morris managed to obtain bank records showing the deposits. The same week, they put my house on the market. According to my will, the one they knew about, the proceeds from the sale would be split equally between them. What they didn't know was that I had created a new will just before the lake house trip, leaving everything to a trust that would only benefit them if they were cleared of any involvement in my death. This will was with my lawyer, who was waiting for the appropriate time to reveal its existence. With their newfound wealth, my children became careless. They spent lavishly. Michael bought a new Lexus, Zora went on a shopping spree at high-end stores, and Isaiah purchased expensive gaming equipment. They also began discussing selling the lake house, seemingly unconcerned about the place where their mother had tragically drowned. Mr. Morris placed a legal listening device in Michael's new car after obtaining proper authorization through connections at the police department. This was a risk, but we had shared enough evidence with a sympathetic detective to get permission for limited surveillance. The breakthrough came 3 months after my death. Michael, Zora, and Isaiah drove to the lake house to prepare it for sale. In the car, with no one else around, they finally spoke freely about what had happened. "Do you ever feel bad about Mom?" Isaiah asked, his voice slightly slurred from the beers they'd been drinking. "Why should we feel bad?" Michael replied. "She would have wasted all that money taking care of other people. Now it's taking care of us." "But we killed her," Isaiah said quietly. "We gave her purpose," Zora interjected. "Her whole life was about providing for us. This was just the ultimate provision. Besides," Michael added, "it was the perfect plan. No body, no evidence, just a tragic accident. And now we each have $150,000. Plus we'll get another $100,000 each when the house sells, and about $50,000 each from the lake house. That's $300,000 per person. Tell me Mom would have ever given us that much while she was alive." "She wouldn't," Zora agreed. "She was always talking about working for what you get, and appreciating the value of money. Well, I appreciate the value of her money just fine." They all laughed, and the conversation moved on to their plans for their newfound wealth. Mr. Morris brought the recording to Ruth, who immediately called me. "We've got them," she said, her voice tight with anger and satisfaction. "They explicitly admitted to killing you. What do we do now?" I had been preparing for this moment. "Now," I said, "we bring me back to life. With clear evidence of my children's crime, it was time to set my plan in motion. But I needed to be strategic. If I simply went to the police, my children might claim the recording was fake or taken out of context. I needed to confront them in a way that would leave no doubt about their guilt. The first step was to legally resurrect myself. I contacted a lawyer recommended by Mr. Morris, someone with no connections to my family who specialized in unusual cases. We filed paperwork to reverse my death certificate, citing new evidence that I was, in fact, alive. This process would take time, but it was essential to reclaim my legal identity. Meanwhile, Mr. Morris continued his surveillance, gathering more evidence of my children's conversations about their crime. He also discovered something disturbing. This might not have been their first attempt to kill me. 6 months before the lake house incident, I had been hospitalized with severe food poisoning. At the time, I had assumed it was from undercooked chicken at a restaurant, but Mr. Morris found a receipt showing that Michael had purchased rat poison the day before I got sick. And Isaiah's text messages revealed a conversation with his siblings about the failed first attempt, and how the lake plan had to work. This discovery shook me to my core. They had been plotting my death for at least half a year, maybe longer. The people I had given life to, nursed through illnesses, supported through every challenge. They had been systematically trying to end my life for financial gain. 4 months after my death, my house sold for $285,000. The money went into escrow, pending the execution of my will. My children, now living comfortably on their insurance payouts, made plans to sell the lake house next. Through Ruth, I learned they had scheduled a meeting with Pastor Thomas to discuss holding a celebration of life service for me, now that they had come to terms with their loss. This would be a public event at our church, with the entire congregation and community invited. "This is it," I told Ruth and Mr. Morris during a strategy meeting at my motel. "This is where I make my return." "Are you sure?" Ruth asked. "It will be very public and potentially dangerous. They tried to kill you once. What's to stop them from trying again?" "They won't try anything in a church full of witnesses," Mr. Morris assured us. "But we should have police standing by, just in case." I nodded. "I've been dead for 4 months. It's time to come back to life and face those who tried to murder me." We spent the next 2 weeks planning every detail. Mr. Morris shared our evidence with Detective James Powell, who had become increasingly convinced of my children's guilt. Detective Powell agreed to have plainclothes officers at the service and to be ready to make arrests. The celebration of life service was scheduled for Sunday afternoon. According to Ruth, who had been invited, my children had spared no expense. There would be catered food, professional photos of me displayed throughout the church, and even custom programs with my picture on them. The irony was not lost on me. They were using my money to celebrate my death. The day before the service, I met with Pastor Thomas in secret. Ruth arranged the meeting, bringing him to Mr. Morris's office without telling him why. When he saw me alive and well, he nearly collapsed from shock. "Amara, how is this possible? We all thought you had drowned," he exclaimed, reaching out to touch my arm as if to verify I was real. "I survived, Pastor," I said simply, "but my children believe they succeeded in murdering me." I showed him the evidence, the recordings, the bank records, everything we had gathered. Pastor Thomas listened in horror, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. "I baptized those children," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I watched them grow up in this church. How could they do such a thing? Money can corrupt even those we think we know best," I replied. "I'm telling you this because I need your help tomorrow. I'm going to confront them during the service." Pastor Thomas was silent for a long moment, clearly struggling with what I was asking. Finally, he nodded. "The church should be a place of truth and justice. I will help you." The plan was set. I would remain hidden until the right moment, then make my entrance. Detective Powell and 3 plainclothes officers would be stationed throughout the church. Mr. Morris would be recording everything. Ruth would ensure I knew when to make my appearance. That night, alone in my motel room, I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman who stared back was different from the one who had died 4 months ago. My hair was different, yes, but the change went deeper. My eyes were harder, my jaw set with determination. I was no longer the trusting, giving mother who had been blind to her children's true nature. I was a survivor, a woman seeking justice. "Tomorrow," I whispered to my reflection, "Amara Johnson rises from the dead." The day of my celebration of life service arrived with unseasonable heat and humidity. I dressed carefully in clothes Ruth had brought me, a conservative black dress I had never worn before, so my children wouldn't recognize it. I kept my short dyed hair and added a hat with a partial veil that would help conceal my face until the right moment. Mr. Morris drove me to the church 2 hours before the service was set to begin. Pastor Thomas met us at a side entrance, leading us to his private office where I would wait. "The church is being decorated now," he informed us. "Your children are supervising everything. They've spent quite a lot on flowers. They can afford it with my insurance money," I replied bitterly. Pastor Thomas placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Are you certain about this, Sister Amara? Once you reveal yourself, there's no going back. The consequences will be devastating for your children." "They chose their path when they decided to murder me for money," I said firmly. "I did not raise them to be killers. They must face justice for what they've done." As the service time approached, I could hear the church filling with people. Through a small window in the office, I watched mourners arriving, friends from the hospital where I worked, neighbors, church members who had known me for decades. They all believed they were coming to celebrate the life of a woman who had accidentally drowned. Ruth texted me updates throughout the pre-service gathering. "Michael is greeting people at the door, acting like the grieving son. Zora is crying on cue whenever someone hugs her. Isaiah looks uncomfortable but is playing along." Detective Powell sent a message confirming that he and his officers were in position. Everything was ready. The service began with a somber organ prelude. From my hiding place, I could hear Pastor Thomas welcoming everyone and thanking them for coming to celebrate my life. There was a hymn, then the first eulogy, from Michael. Ruth had slipped a small earpiece to me, connected to a microphone she had hidden in her purse in the front pew. Through it, I could hear everything clearly. "My mother was a giving woman," Michael was saying, his voice breaking convincingly. "She always put others before herself. She worked so hard to provide for us after our father left. Her tragic accident at the lake house has left a void in our lives that can never be filled." I felt physically ill listening to his performance. This was the same man who had pushed me into the lake and watched coldly as I struggled in the water. Zora spoke next, sharing cherished memories of our shopping trips and heart-to-heart talks. "Mom always wanted the best for us," she said tearfully. "She would be happy to know that we're taking care of each other now, just like she taught us." Isaiah's eulogy was shorter, and I could hear the strain in his voice. "Of my 3 children, he seemed to be the one struggling most with guilt. Mom loved us unconditionally," he said haltingly. "She deserved better than what happened to her." After the eulogies, Pastor Thomas announced that there would be a special video tribute, compiled by my children. The lights dimmed as images of my life flashed across a screen. Me holding my babies, at their graduations, celebrating birthdays and holidays. All the while, Whitney Houston's "I Will Always Love You" played in the background. When the video ended, there was barely a dry eye in the house, except I imagined for my children, who had paid for this elaborate production with the proceeds of my death. This was the moment we had planned for. Pastor Thomas took to the pulpit again. "Before we conclude our service," he said, his voice stronger than usual, "I have a special announcement. We've been celebrating the life of Sister Amara as if she were gone from us, but God works in mysterious ways, and sometimes what we believe to be true is not the reality." I could hear confused murmuring through my earpiece. Ruth texted, "Your kids look confused." Michael is whispering to Zora. "Today," Pastor Thomas continued, "we have witnessed eulogies from 3 children who spoke eloquently about their love for their mother, but God knows what is in our hearts, and He knows when words do not match actions." The murmuring grew louder. Ruth texted again. "Michael looks angry. Isaiah is pale." "Scripture tells us that the truth shall set us free," Pastor Thomas said, his voice rising. "And today the truth walks among us." That was my cue. I stood, adjusted my hat, and walked out of the office. 2 of Detective Powell's plainclothes officers flanked me as I made my way to the main sanctuary. At the double doors, I paused, taking a deep breath. Then I pushed the doors open and walked down the center aisle of the church. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Gasps echoed throughout the sanctuary. Someone screamed. Several people stood up, pointing at me in shock. "It's Amara! She's alive!" Oh my God. But I didn't look at them. My eyes were fixed on the front row, where my 3 children sat frozen in disbelief. Michael saw me first. His face drained of color, and he gripped the pew in front of him so tightly his knuckles turned white. Zora's mouth fell open in a silent scream, her eyes wide with terror. Isaiah slumped forward, looking as though he might faint. I continued walking steadily down the aisle until I reached the front of the church. There, I removed my hat and veil, revealing my face clearly to everyone. "Hello, my children," I said, my voice carrying through the now silent church. "Surprised to see me alive?" Michael was the first to recover. "Mom?" he stammered, his actor's mask slipping back into place. "Is it really you? This is a miracle. We thought you had drowned." He stood, arms outstretched as if to embrace me. I stepped back. "Don't touch me," I said coldly. "Don't pretend you're happy to see me." The church was completely silent now, everyone watching this unexpected drama unfold. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Zora asked, finding her voice. "We've been devastated. We thought you drowned. Where have you been all this time?" "I've been hiding," I replied, my voice steady. "Hiding from my own children who tried to murder me." The crowd gasped. Pastor Thomas stepped forward. "Brothers and sisters," he addressed the congregation, "what you are witnessing today is both a miracle and a tragedy. Sister Amara did not drown accidentally as we were told. She survived an attempt on her life, an attempt made by her own children." Michael's face contorted with rage and fear. "This is ridiculous. Mom must have hit her head when she fell into the lake. She's confused, delusional." "I'm not confused, Michael," I said. "I remember everything clearly. I remember you pushing me into the lake. I remember Zora telling you to do it and Isaiah watching it happen. I remember you discussing how to make sure I didn't resurface." Isaiah crumpled into the pew, burying his face in his hands. Zora stood up, looking wildly around the church as if seeking an escape. Michael stepped toward me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Everyone, please," he said, addressing the shocked congregation. "My mother has obviously been through a traumatic experience. She's confused. We need to get her medical help." "The only help needed here is legal," Detective Powell said, stepping forward and showing his badge. "Michael Johnson, Zora Johnson, Isaiah Johnson, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Amara Johnson." As the other officers moved in, Michael made a desperate lunge toward the side exit. He didn't get far before being tackled to the ground. Zora began screaming, claiming innocence, while Isaiah simply surrendered, tears streaming down his face. The congregation was in an uproar. Some were crying, others shouting questions. Pastor Thomas called for order, but the chaos continued as my children were handcuffed and read their rights. Through it all, I stood still, watching the scene unfold. This was not how I had imagined my family would end up, my children in handcuffs, being led away for trying to kill me. But they had made their choice that day at the lake, and now they would face the consequences. As the officers led them past me toward the exit, each of my children reacted differently. Michael refused to look at me, his jaw clenched in defiance. Zora glared with naked hatred. Only Isaiah met my eyes, his face crumpled in shame and regret. "Why?" I asked him quietly as he passed. "I gave you everything." "It was never enough," he whispered back. "We always wanted more." Those words cut deeper than any knife could have. After all my sacrifices, all my love, it had never been enough for them. I had raised 3 children who valued money more than their own mother's life. Once my children were taken away, Detective Powell approached me. "Mrs. Johnson, we'll need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. We have the recordings and other evidence, but we'll need your testimony as well." I nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving me drained. Ruth pushed through the crowd and wrapped her arms around me. "You did it, Amara. You were so brave." "I don't feel brave," I admitted quietly. "I feel broken." Pastor Thomas called for the congregation's attention. "Brothers and sisters, we came here today expecting to mourn, but instead we have witnessed the hand of God bringing truth to light. Sister Amara has survived a terrible betrayal. She needs our support and prayers now more than ever." People began approaching me, some hugging me, others just touching my hand or shoulder, as if to confirm I was real. Their faces showed a mixture of shock, relief, and horror at what they had learned. My coworkers from the hospital surrounded me protectively. "We've missed you so much," my supervisor said, tears in her eyes. "Your job is waiting whenever you're ready to come back." Neighbors promised meals and support. Church members offered prayers and assistance. In the midst of this terrible day, I was reminded that while my children had betrayed me, I was not alone in the world. As Ruth and I left the church with Detective Powell, photographers and news reporters had already gathered outside, alerted by someone inside the church with a cell phone. Camera flashes blinded me as questions were shouted from all directions. "Mrs. Johnson, how did you survive? Did your children really try to murder you? Where have you been hiding for the past 4 months?" Detective Powell shielded me from the cameras, guiding me to his unmarked police car. "We'll issue a statement later," he told the reporters. "Right now, Mrs. Johnson needs privacy and rest." In the car, driving to the police station, the reality of what had just occurred hit me fully. My children, my flesh and blood, were going to prison for attempting to murder me. The life I had built, the family I thought I had, was gone forever. What happens now? I asked Detective Powell quietly. "We have strong evidence against them," he replied. "The recording of them admitting to the crime, your testimony, the financial motive. They'll likely face significant prison time." "And what about me? Legally, I'm still dead." "We'll help you navigate the process of legally coming back to life," he assured me. "It's complicated but not impossible. Your death certificate will be invalidated, your assets returned to your control." I nodded, staring out the window at the familiar streets of Atlanta. I had been dead for 4 months, and now I was returning to a life that would never be the same. At the police station, I gave a detailed statement about everything that had happened, from overhearing my children's conversation at Isaiah's birthday to the moment they pushed me into the lake and everything that followed. The process took hours, but I remained calm and clear, determined that justice would be served. When we finally finished, Ruth was waiting to take me to her home. "You'll stay with me tonight," she insisted. "Tomorrow we can figure out next steps." As we drove to her house, Ruth glanced at me with concern. "How are you really doing, Amara?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I feel hollow, like everything I believed about my life was a lie." "Not everything," Ruth said firmly. "You are still the good, kind, strong woman you've always been. What your children did doesn't change who you are." That night, in Ruth's guest bedroom, I lay awake for hours, replaying the events of the day. The looks on my children's faces when they saw me alive, the shock and horror of the congregation, the kindness of friends and strangers offering support. I had survived not just an attempt on my life, but the devastating revelation that my own children had never truly loved me. Now I had to find a way to live with that knowledge and rebuild some kind of life from the ashes of what I had lost. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Newspapers, television, social media. "Mother crashes own funeral, children arrested for attempted murder," screamed the headlines. My face was on every screen, my story dissected by reporters and commentators. Some praised my courage and cunning in catching my would-be killers. Others questioned why I had waited months to come forward rather than going to the police immediately. Experts debated the psychological impact of such a profound betrayal. Everyone seemed to have an opinion on what had happened to me. Through it all, I remained sequestered at Ruth's house, ignoring the reporters camped outside and the constant ringing of her phone. I needed time to process everything before facing the world. A week after the funeral confrontation, Mr. Morris brought news from my lawyer. "Your new will is being processed," he explained. "The one that prevents your children from benefiting if they were involved in your death. And the insurance company has frozen the payouts pending the criminal investigation." "What about my house?" I asked. "They sold it. The sale will likely be invalidated since you weren't actually dead," Mr. Morris explained. "It's complicated, but your lawyer is confident you'll get it back, or at least the proceeds from the sale." I nodded, relieved but also overwhelmed by the legal complexities of returning from the dead. There would be months, perhaps years, of sorting through these issues. 2 weeks later, My children were formally charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and a host of other crimes. The prosecutor, armed with the recording of their admission and my testimony, was confident of a conviction. I attended their arraignment, sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching as they entered in orange jumpsuits and handcuffs. They looked smaller somehow, diminished. Michael remained defiant, Zora bitter, and Isaiah broken. None of them looked at me directly, even when the judge asked how they pleaded. All three, on advice from their court-appointed attorneys, pleaded not guilty. As they were led away, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of justice being served. Only an immense sadness for what could have been. The family I thought I had. The love I believed we shared. Outside the courthouse, reporters again swarmed around me, shouting questions. This time I decided to speak briefly. I love my children unconditionally, I told them, my voice steady despite my breaking heart. I would have given them anything they truly needed. They didn't have to try to kill me for money. That's what makes this betrayal so painful. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't ever necessary. In the days that followed, I began the process of reclaiming my life. I moved back into a small apartment while the legal issues with my house were being resolved. I reconnected with friends and colleagues. I sought therapy to help process the trauma and betrayal. Slowly, I started to rebuild. But the woman who emerged from this ordeal was not the same trusting, giving person who had gone to the lake house that fateful day. I was stronger in some ways, but also more guarded, more cautious about where I placed my trust and affection. As the criminal case against my children progressed, I learned more disturbing details about their plot. The rat poison incident 6 months earlier had indeed been a deliberate attempt to kill me. They had been researching untraceable poisons and accidents for over a year. The lake house drowning was their third attempt on my life. Each revelation was another wound to my heart. How had I raised children capable of such calculation and cruelty? What had I missed? Where had I gone wrong? My therapist helped me understand that I wasn't to blame for their choices. You can raise children with the same values, the same love, the same opportunities, she explained. And they will still make their own decisions as adults. Their actions reflect who they are, not your parenting. Intellectually, I understood this. Emotionally, it was harder to accept. 4 months after their arrest, faced with the overwhelming evidence against them, my children accepted a plea deal. Michael and Zora each received 25 years in prison for attempted murder and conspiracy. Isaiah, who had shown remorse and cooperated with prosecutors, received 15 years. I attended their sentencing hearing, listening as each was given the opportunity to speak before receiving their punishment. Michael remained defiant, claiming he had been misunderstood and that the recording had been taken out of context. Zora blamed Michael for leading them astray, portraying herself as a reluctant participant. Only Isaiah seemed genuinely contrite. "Mom," he said, turning to face me directly for the first time. "I know saying sorry isn't enough. Nothing will ever be enough. But I am sorry, not just for getting caught, but for betraying you in the worst possible way. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know that I understand what I did, and I will live with that shame for the rest of my life." His words touched something in me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps the first tiny seed from which forgiveness might one day grow. I gave him a small nod, acknowledging his apology without accepting it. As they were led away to begin their sentences, I realized this chapter of my life was finally closing. My children would spend the prime years of their lives in prison, all because they couldn't wait for their inheritance. I walked out of that courtroom a different woman than the one who had nearly drowned in that lake. I was Amara Johnson, survivor, fighter, phoenix, risen from the ashes of betrayal. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings as I worked to fully reclaim my life. The insurance company sued my children to recover the money they had fraudulently claimed. The sale of my house was indeed invalidated, though the innocent buyers had to be compensated, reducing the amount I ultimately recovered. I decided to sell the lake house. I could never look at that water again without remembering how close I had come to dying there. The sale brought $165,000, which I used to buy a small, comfortable condo closer to the hospital. The media attention gradually died down, though occasionally reporters would approach me for interviews or updates. I declined most requests, preferring to rebuild my life quietly. However, I did agree to one in-depth interview with a respected journalist who wanted to explore the issue of elder financial abuse. "What happened to me is extreme," I explained during the interview. "But financial exploitation of older family members is surprisingly common. Children stealing from parents, grandchildren manipulating grandparents, caregivers abusing their position of trust. It happens every day, and often goes unreported because of shame or fear." The article helped launch me into unexpected advocacy work. I began speaking at community centers and senior groups about recognizing the warning signs of exploitation and how to protect oneself. I shared my story, painful as it was, hoping it might help others avoid similar betrayal. Through this work, I met other survivors, people who had been exploited or abused by those they trusted most. Their stories helped me feel less alone in my experience. Together, we created a support network for victims of family financial abuse. At the hospital, I returned to nursing part-time. The work had always given me purpose, and helping others heal became part of my own healing process. My coworkers were supportive, though I sometimes caught them watching me with pity or morbid fascination. Being the woman whose children tried to kill her was an identity I would never fully escape. Pastor Thomas invited me to share my experience with the church congregation, framing it as a testimony about surviving betrayal through faith and resilience. Standing at that same pulpit where my children had eulogized me, I spoke about forgiveness, not as something I had achieved, but as something I was struggling toward. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing, I explained to the rapt congregation. It means releasing the power that betrayal holds over you. It's a gift you give yourself, not the person who wronged you. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying. A year after my resurrection, I received my first letter from Isaiah in prison. He had been attending therapy and educational programs, trying to understand the choices he had made. "I don't expect you to write back," his letter concluded. "I don't deserve your time or attention after what I did, but I wanted you to know that I think about you every day and the pain I caused you. If I live to be 100, I will never stop being sorry." I read the letter many times before deciding whether to respond. Finally, I wrote a short note. "Isaiah, I received your letter. I cannot offer forgiveness yet, but I acknowledge your regret. Take advantage of every program offered to you. Learn, grow, become someone who would never make the choices you made. That is what I want for you now." I received no communication from Michael or Zora. According to Isaiah's letters, which eventually became regular, Michael had become a leader among the prison population, using his charisma to gain status and privileges. Zora had withdrawn into herself, speaking little to anyone. As the second anniversary of my death approached, I found myself thinking more about the future than the past. The legal issues were largely resolved. My financial situation was stable. I had a home, work I valued, and friends who had proven their loyalty. What I didn't have was family. The void left by my children's betrayal remained unfilled. I had devoted my adult life to being a mother, and now that identity was fractured beyond repair. Ruth suggested I consider fostering older children, teenagers who often had the hardest time finding homes. "You have so much love and wisdom to give, Amara," she said. "Don't let your children's actions rob the world of your maternal gifts." The idea took root slowly. I began by volunteering at a group home for teens in the foster system, many of whom had experienced their own profound betrayals. I taught them practical skills, cooking, budgeting, basic health care, while listening to their stories and offering guidance. One girl in particular, Desiree, reminded me of myself at 16, determined, intelligent, and trying to mother her younger siblings despite her own youth. Over months of working with her, we developed a strong connection. When Desiree aged out of the system at 18, with her siblings placed in separate foster homes, she had nowhere to go. After much consideration and consultation with my therapist, I offered her my spare bedroom while she attended community college. "This isn't charity," I told her clearly. "It's an investment in your future. I believe in you, and I want to help you achieve your goals." Desiree moved in with an air of suspicious gratitude, accepting help while waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was an attitude I understood all too well after my own experiences. Over time, Our arrangement evolved into something neither of us had expected. Not quite mother and daughter, but a family of choice. We established boundaries, respected each other's independence, and gradually built a foundation of trust. Through Desiree, I met other young people who needed guidance and support. My condo became a gathering place for her friends, many of whom had aged out of foster care with no family support. I offered meals, advice, and occasionally financial help, but always with clear expectations and boundaries. "You're building a new family," my therapist observed during one of our sessions. "One based on choice rather than blood." "Is that even possible after everything?" I asked. "Not only possible, but perhaps healthier," she replied. "You're choosing each other consciously, with open eyes and honest communication." 3 years after my children tried to kill me, I received notice that Isaiah was eligible for a sentence reduction due to his continued cooperation and exemplary behavior. The parole board invited me to submit a statement regarding his possible early release. This presented me with a profound dilemma. Isaiah had shown genuine remorse, unlike his siblings. He had been the reluctant participant in the attempt on my life, though still a participant. Could I support his return to society? Could I find enough forgiveness in my heart to give him another chance? I struggled with the decision for weeks, consulting with Ruth, my therapist, and even Pastor Thomas. Finally, I wrote a carefully worded statement to the parole board. Amara Johnson participated in a plot to murder me, his mother, for financial gain. This fact cannot be erased or minimized. However, based on our communication over the past 3 years, I believe he has genuinely confronted the gravity of his actions and sought to understand the failures of character that led him to such a terrible decision. While I cannot forget what he did, I do not object to his early release if the board deems him rehabilitated and no longer a danger to society. It was not a ringing endorsement, but it was all I could honestly offer. The parole board approved Isaiah's release, reducing his sentence to time served plus 5 years of supervised probation. One condition of his release was that he could not contact me without my explicit permission. 6 months after his release, Isaiah sent a request through his parole officer asking if we could meet. After much consideration, I agreed to see him in a public place, a cafe near the hospital where I worked. The young man who sat across from me looked both familiar and like a stranger. Prison had aged him, added lines to his face that shouldn't have been there at 24. He had lost weight, and his eyes held a wariness that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, his voice quiet. "Why did you want to meet?" I asked directly. "To see you in person, to tell you face to face how sorry I am, and to ask..." He hesitated. "To ask what I can do to make amends, knowing nothing will ever be enough." I studied him carefully before responding. "Isaiah, you participated in trying to kill me for money. There's no making amends for that. There's only moving forward and becoming someone who would never make that choice again." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I understand. I just needed to tell you that I think about what we did every day, what I did. I don't blame Michael and Zora. We all made our choices. And I'll regret mine for the rest of my life." "What are you doing now?" I asked. "Working construction," he replied. "Taking classes at night, psychology actually. I want to understand why people make the choices they do, why I made the choices I did." We talked for an hour, not as mother and son, but as two people connected by a terrible past, trying to navigate an uncertain future. I couldn't forgive him fully, not yet, maybe not ever, but I could acknowledge his efforts to change, to understand, to make better choices. As we prepared to leave, Isaiah asked hesitantly, "Can I contact you again sometime?" I considered this carefully before answering. "You can email me," I said finally. "Not regularly, but to update me on your progress. I can't promise I'll always respond, but I'll read what you send." It wasn't reconciliation or forgiveness. It was simply an acknowledgement that we were both still here, still human, still capable of growth and change despite the damage we had inflicted and endured. 5 years after my death and resurrection, my life had found a new normal. I had retired from nursing but continued my advocacy work, establishing a foundation to help victims of financial exploitation recover and rebuild. The Amara Johnson Second Chance Foundation provided legal assistance, temporary housing, and counseling to people who had been betrayed by family members. I had written a book about my experience, Rising from the Dead, how I survived my children's murder plot and reclaimed my life. The proceeds funded the foundation, and the publicity helped reach more victims who needed support. Desiree had graduated from nursing school and moved into her own apartment, though she still came for dinner every Sunday, a tradition we had established together rather than one inherited from my past. Several other young people had cycled through my spare room over the years, each staying until they were ready to stand on their own. Isaiah had completed his probation and earned an associate's degree in psychology. Our communication remained limited but civil. He volunteered with at-risk youth, trying to steer them away from the choices he had made. We met occasionally, always in public places, always with clear boundaries. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a kind of peace. Michael and Zora remained in prison. Michael had been caught running various scams behind bars, extending his sentence. Zora had eventually written to me, not to apologize, but to blame me for ruining her life. I returned the letter unopened on the 5th anniversary of my confrontation at the church, my true resurrection day, as Ruth called it. I hosted a gathering at my condo for the family I had built. Ruth was there, as were Desiree and several other young people I had mentored. Pastor Thomas attended with his wife. Detective Powell, now promoted to captain, came with his family. Mr. Morris, whose investigative work had been crucial to bringing my children to justice, joined us with his daughter. As I looked around at these people who had supported me through the darkest time of my life, or entered it afterward to bring new light, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The family I had lost had never truly loved me. The family I had found chose me every day, just as I chose them. I want to thank all of you, I said, raising my glass in a toast. 5 years ago today, I rose from the dead. I confronted those who had tried to kill me, and I began the long process of rebuilding my life. I couldn't have done it without you. To Amara, Ruth said, raising her glass, the strongest woman I know. To second chances, added Pastor Thomas. To chosen family, Desiree said softly. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my balcony looking at the Atlanta skyline. The pain of my children's betrayal would never completely disappear. The questions: how did I miss the signs? What could I have done differently? Where did my love go wrong? Would never have satisfactory answers. But I had learned to live with the uncertainty, to find joy despite the lingering grief. I had discovered that family could be built on choice and respect, rather than blood and obligation. I had created a life of purpose from the ashes of betrayal. My name is Amara Johnson. I am 51 years old. 5 years ago, my children tried to murder me for money. Today, I am more alive than I have ever been. If you've enjoyed my story, please like and subscribe to my channel for more incredible true stories of survival and justice. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted your children at their own funeral? Would you have been able to rebuild your life after such betrayal? I read every comment and am always moved by your thoughts and support. Also, write to me about where you heard this story from. For more life stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many other stories waiting for you. Until next time, remember that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to rise again and create a new beginning. Thank you for listening to my story.